My name is Bill Hoag, H-O-A-G, and I'm a board member of the Door County Environmental Council. We're sponsoring the event tonight. We're fully in support of the speaker and the organization that she represents moving forward in the Green Bay, in the body of water known as Green Bay. This event is sponsored by, as I say, by the Door County Environmental Council, and I'll just, rather than try to speak without looking at something. DCEC was incorporated 50 years ago, over 50 years ago, and we advocate for the preservation of Door County's natural resources for its inhabitants and future generations. We're involved with a number of different issues at this point in time, but we'd like to have NERR come into play so that we and they can benefit from each other environmentally. There's no better time to get into the environmental situation than now. Hopefully with the pandemic, I don't want to say winding down, but decreasing, with the Olympics going on, the environment, I think, is going to take its place amongst the most important issues that this area, this country, the world has right now, between climate change, between invasive species in the Great Lakes, between the radical nature of storms, of high water, low water, droughts, forest fires. We're incurring events that we've never seen before. And unfortunately, I think those events are going to accentuate themselves over the next long period of time. I don't know how much our generation can do. I don't know how much my kids' generation can do, but I'd like to see something happen with Green Bay, that where my grandkids enjoy the same benefits I did for this body of water. By that I mean sailing, kayaking, swimming, windsurfing, a number of different things that we were able to do here that I'm concerned that maybe 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now might not happen if we don't step in now, if all of us don't step in. We're responsible for whatever negative has happened in this area. We have to be responsible to modify and change. And I challenge all of you in this room, I challenge our government to do their job and basically bring Green Bay, bring the Great Lakes back to what it was, at least bring it back to a point where it's stable. And the stability is critical at this point in time. I have two entities to thank for helping put on this event. One is the City of Sturgeon Bay. City of Sturgeon Bay, thanks to Mark Holy, the mayor, and Caitlin Olson have been generous with their ideas, their thoughts in terms of what is happening in this community and what we can do to make things better for them and they for us. Second entity is where you are right now, the Maritime Museum. Thanks to Terry Connolly, and thanks to, I neglected to thank Caitlin Olson of the city as well. Thanks to Terry Connolly, thanks to Sam Perlman in the back with his vivid pink shorts on, we're able to put on this event in a way that makes it effective for everybody. The Maritime Museum has devoted itself to making everybody aware of the history of the maritime entity in Door County. It's done an extremely good job. The addition of the tower points out for not only the Maritime Museum, but for the city of Sturgeon Bay and for the surrounding area, being the tallest structure in the area, how this all fits together and how it can get better and better and better. Which brings us to, why we're here. We've tried, DCEC has tried, thanks to Steve Etalk, thanks to Mike Barkey, who have been involved with this for some period of time, to make people aware of not only the positive things but more importantly, the challenges that we have faced and will face. We've got to be able to face those challenges. And thanks to organization and the entity I'm about to introduce were able to do that in a much more effective way. As I say, I'm Bill Hogue. I'm a new member of the board of DCEC. I'm a civil engineer, retired civil engineer and commercial developer as a background. And my biggest concern is for the environment and frankly, for my grandchildren aging from 5 to 11. I want them to have the same benefits that I had. NERR, I hope I get this right. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, so if I pronounce this word, it's because I'm a city kid. So let me see if I can do this. I got to find it first. The national, here's the word, Estuarine, how did I do? Estuarine Research Reserve System, otherwise known as NERR. Correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but I think this will be the 30th chapter in the organization. The organization is sponsored by NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and by the UWGB to basically be funded and do their job. And their job in this particular case, I'll backtrack a little bit. The other 29 entities are on the East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, and several within the Great Lakes. This is the first one that's dedicated to the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. And when you look at your brochure, it's not Lake Huron, it's Lake Huron. My fault, it wasn't correct. Devoted to this area. And Emily and her organization will be over the next 4.5 to 6 years studying Green Bay, understanding Green Bay, looking at the positives, looking at the negatives, and hopefully coming up with solutions over that period of time. DCEC, the museum, City of Surgeon Bay are fully behind what they're trying to do. Emily Tyner has been given the challenging task of heading up this particular chapter of NERR, and there's nobody better qualified to do this. I can't even pronounce the degrees that she both has and will have, in addition to being a wife, a mother, and an administrator. So without further ado, I'll have Emily come up here and basically present what she is about to do, and hopefully we'll all be in support of her. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here and for the Maritime Museum for hosting us. This is a great venue. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay, great. Yep, as Bill said, I'm with the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. I'm in a new role as of September 1st with the university. I'm the director of Freshwater Strategy. My work is focused on building partnerships on campus around water and also in the community around water. And community is quite broad there because the university serves a large region, 400 miles of coastline in 11 counties. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the School of Freshwater Sciences, hoping to graduate October, November, so really close to being done. And then finally, I'm the state lead on the designation of the reserve, this new reserve. So I'm gonna run through some background on how we got to where we are, what it means to have a reserve in the region, Northeast Wisconsin, Lake Michigan, where we are in the process of designation, and then some next steps for continued involvement if you want to learn more and stay involved, and I can answer questions. Just a background of, if you're not familiar with the university, we're a 4-campus university now, Marinette, Green Bay, Sheboygan, and Manitowoc, 400 miles of shoreline. Really, this water coast is what we're calling it. We cover a lot of area, so representing the whole Northeast Wisconsin, essentially. There's a history of eco-U, this phrasing eco-U for UW Green Bay, and we're really trying to bring that back and think about what that means to be stewards of the environment, to incorporate ecology and water into our curriculum. And this initiative, the Chancellor Alexander, really sees it as a 50, 100-year investment around water to serve the region. So we have a lot of strong backing from the highest level of the university, which is really great to see for this program. So a bit of history, which the history starts with Caitlin Olson and people in this room. 2015 or so, I think, yeah, Caitlin and some other folks from the region, from Sturgeon Bay, approached the university with an interest in an entity or some sort of kind of research and education capacity around water. Correct me if I'm wrong in telling the story, but I think that's what, yeah. And the university was intrigued. I work for the dean of the business school, Matt Dornbush. His background is in science. He already had an interest in this too, as did Patrick Robinson with UW Extension. So it was good timing to hear about Sturgeon Bay's interest and also the university's. So university got a grant from Wisconsin Coastal Management Program to fund Caitlin and to explore basically what would it take to bring some sort of research education entity to the region. And through that kind of a feasibility analysis of sorts, they landed on this National Estuarine Research Reserve. You got that pronunciation right, Bill. There had probably at the time, maybe 5 years previous, there had been a designation of a similar entity in Lake Superior in Wisconsin. So there was already knowledge of this in the state, which is a good platform to start from. It took a little while to get organized, to get the support, to basically put forth a nomination, but officially in March of 2019, there was a letter from Governor Evers to Noaa that put us in the process and got us on the map for designation. So some years to build up the support, but we got there. And then I was hired in 2020 and and now moving forward with the process. This movement towards this reserve, I think, is built on, it's good timing, I should say, because of the capacity in the region around water, the buy-in from so many entities. I've most recently come from Milwaukee, and I'm just so impressed with how Northeast Wisconsin has organized around conservation and water. Part of that's probably the investment in the cleanup of the Fox River, the area of concern in Lower Green Bay, taking off the list of areas of concern, the Menominee River last fall, just a lot of movement. Part of that's congressional support for the region, and it builds just a great platform, I should say, for this kind of work and building support pretty quickly for bringing a reserve to the area. And so we hope that the reserve, the NERR, can really be a central organizing point for these entities and more to organize around water, to have some sort of cohesive vision, to apply for funding, to just be a central place to elevate the platform of the Bay of Green Bay. So what does it mean to be a National Estuarine Research Reserve? This system is a 40-year-old system. I think the first reserve was South Slough in Oregon. 1980 was a Great Lakes edition, and then since then there have been another Great Lakes addition to that network. It's 29 coastal sites. At its core, it provides funding for research and education around estuaries, which are areas where large rivers meet bodies of water. Those can be in freshwater or saltwater. And then also it provides money for education and programming. And I should pause and say that the Bay of Green Bay is the largest freshwater estuary in the world. We're going to stand by that, even if we're pretty sure that's true. It's an important thing to say. And it's significant because, as Val Klump, maybe some of you know, the dean of the School of Freshwater Sciences, where I'm a student, likes to say that this system, the Bay, is large enough that the processes that happen there, the physical, biogeochemical, fisheries, water chemistry, all those processes are reflected in other water bodies, other large freshwater bodies and saltwater bodies for that matter. So lessons learned can be transferable to other systems. You can learn a lot, but it's constrained and small enough that when you do research or kind of have management, you want to do some sort of management change, you can see impacts relatively quickly. And that balance of being significant enough to study, but small enough to see management implications is, you don't find that everywhere in the world. And because of that, we really want the reserve and being part of this network to help elevate and tell that story and attract research talent from not just the nation, but the world, essentially, to come here to learn from what we've learned and to help us do further research. So one reason to join this reserve network is to just get a bigger platform to essentially tell that water story of the Bay of Green Bay. Another thing about this reserve, and I think one reason this effort's appealing to the region, or it was appealing for the university to bring it to the region, is it's non-regulatory. So no new regulations are imposed because of designation. That means no changes in fishing or boat traffic or hunting or commercial boat traffic, which is of course very important to Sturgeon Bay and the Bay generally. None of that would change because it's not a regulatory agency. And then the NERR system has a phrase I really like: locally relevant, nationally significant. That each of these 29 reserves is designed to really address local ecosystem challenges. So for us, regionally, that could be things like harmful algal blooms, eutrophication from excess nutrients, infrastructure, shoreline infrastructure, and dealing with fluctuating water levels. You know that the changes happen really quickly, helping communities respond to that. Climate change, emerging contaminants, it's a big list. But we can target our research and bring in expertise and our training opportunities around those local issues. But by joining a national network, we have access to lessons learned from other locations. Like, for example, last year, when the water levels were so significantly high, and people had questions about rising water, we could look to the reserve in South Carolina that's dealing with flooding on their reserve property and in their communities. So just that the access to expertise and knowledge is really exciting for us, and to be able to bring that to the region as we need it. So I'm going to talk now about what it means to be this partnership between the state and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You might know NOAA, they do a lot of work with weather. They're significant for Great Lakes and ocean research. That's their domain is oceans and Great Lakes. So this is a partnership between the state and the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay will be the state lead, the state entity for this. I have ownership there, but actually we would not be taking ownership of land unless it was land that was already included in the reserve. There's no new land purchased because of a reserve designation, but we would kind of co-manage it with existing entities. The university the staff members that become part of the reserve would be staff members of the university. Each reserve usually has about 5 staff members, a steward for education, for research, for stewardship and training, and then a reserve manager, and then some additional staff people as needed. And then funding, about 30% of funding is from the state, a combination of state funds and private funds. The national role of this, NOAA's role, is that they provide overall program guidance. So there's some similar research programs at every reserve and some similar education opportunities, technical assistance as needed, program coordination, and significantly funding. About 70% of the operational costs come from NOAA. And I'm pleased that there's been a significant bipartisan support since the beginning of the program 40 years ago, and there continues to be. In fact, I think just last year there was a bump up in funding for every reserve, and Green Bay got about $50,000 to help us in our designation process. So yeah, it just seems like this is a nationally recognized program and supported. This is a map of currently the 29 reserves that already exist. The ones in blue are the reserves that are already established. The ones in red are in the process of being designated. So it's us in Wisconsin, then Louisiana and Connecticut. Connecticut's a bit ahead of us. They've already selected a site for their reserve. They just completed that process just a few months ago. But we're pretty close and on par with Louisiana. That's their logo at the bottom. And it's been a really interesting process to observe them and to learn from them, kind of like being siblings in this role. I have a call with the reserve manager from those 2 reserves on Thursday, where we'll talk through where we each are at in the process. So it's been nice to go through it with someone else, another state. This will be the 3rd reserve in the Great Lakes, following Old Woman Creek in Lake Erie, which was designated in 1980, and the Lake Superior Reserve in Superior, Wisconsin, which was designated in 2010. The Lake Superior Reserve is also a partner in the UW system. It's a UW extension is their state lead agency, but already we're working closely with them and talking about some shared programs. I did a virtual presentation with their reserve manager a few months ago with the Art Museum in Madison. So there's a lot of potential to work closely with that reserve, which is exciting that we can collaborate closely with that group. And yeah, we're excited to be the 3rd reserve. So this Green Bay Reserve will have physical locations in the waters of Green Bay. like the estuary, but it will represent the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron ecosystem, as Bill said. So what that means is that programmatically, we will offer programs to communities essentially all around Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. We have to figure out what that looks like. But we would be serving and make sure that our research represents interests around the whole Lake Michigan, Lake Huron ecosystem. But we're also not in competition with any other sites around Lake Michigan. This is the one for Lake Michigan, at least for the time being. About the Lake Superior Reserve, just because we're so close to them. So they have a physical location, their built infrastructure, their visitor center and office space is in Superior, Wisconsin. And then they have some of their properties, their natural areas on the St. Louis River, an area of concern. Parts of it are owned by the county and the city and the DNR. And that's called a multi-component reserve, where you have different pieces that are usually non-contiguous. And then you have a visitor center in one location and then natural areas in others. That's very likely the model that we're going to be going for here with the Bay of Green Bay Reserve, where we have a visitor center in one location, and then we will select state-owned or federally owned properties around the bay that represent different ecosystem types, or a gradient of maybe pristine to develop more restored, factors like that. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But that model, just so you know, that multi-component reserve is what we're going for. So we are already looking closely at how Lake Superior got to where they are and what areas they included. I'm now going to talk about the goals for a Bay of Green Bay Reserve. It's a bit, I'll just read them out loud because it might be hard to read in the back. The first three are national system goals for the reserve system as a whole. And then the bottom two are particular ones that we are bringing to this designation, kind of our own maybe spin on things. But so at the top, the reserves are designed to address coastal management issues, to help coordinate local research and also national research. So there's a suite of monitoring that every reserve does, like looking at water quality, fish, invertebrates, weather patterns, and that data is contributed to a national data set from the whole reserve system. So essentially, Noaa can take a pulse on the health of reserves around the country, and it'll be exciting to be able to contribute that to that data set and have our data join this long-term data set. But then also we would expect to do some system-wide partnerships. So there's the NERR Science Collaborative is a program that moves around every 5 years. It's a NOAA-sponsored program. It's currently at the University of Michigan, and they provide seed money to do collaborative research among reserves. Right now, for example, the Lake Superior and the Lake Erie Reserve have funding to test very sensitive algal sensors because of harmful algal blooms, and I could see us participating in something like that. The Lake Superior Reserve is working with the reserve in Hawaii to think about relationships with local tribes and kind of the tribal NERR connection. So it's a really interesting way to have money for research that you can think about shared interests and collaborative research opportunities among the system. And I'm looking forward to us tapping into that. There's also a new graduate program that every reserve gets a graduate fellowship, a fellow for 2 years to address local concerns of their reserve system. So that's the Margaret Davidson Fellow. It's in its first year. So that would also be something we tap into. That is part of number 2, enhancing public awareness and understanding of estuaries, a big focus on K through 12 education. So working with school districts, being a place that visitors can come to do hands-on experiential learning around water, taking hikes, going on the bay, doing water sampling. There's a program called Teachers on the Estuary, TOTE, where it brings teachers to every reserve for 2-week stints to get training, some hands-on training, and then provides curriculum support throughout the year so that they can keep bringing that science into their classroom. So we'd like to participate in that too. And then number 3 is just as a partnership for agencies, federal agencies, state, public and private entities, and really to help us bring some federal money to the region because we have this reserve here. So those are kind of the national goals, but then specifically to Green Bay, the Bay of Green Bay, we have 2 maybe more specific interests. One is we really want to take a holistic approach to water. So this means thinking about the ways that water touches our lives, beyond, we know that the science is going to happen because it's built into the program, and that will definitely happen with this reserve. But what if, like, thinking about the economic connections, working waterfronts, the history of people, the First Nations history, that's tribal connections is really important to us. Storytelling, art. So for example, in that vein, we have a grant into Wisconsin Sea Grant. It's myself and a faculty in music. We've applied for funding to do a soundscape of collecting sounds from around the Bay, interspersed with stories from folks that have worked on the Bay a long time, some historical stories. And that we'd have it as a display at the NERR, that it could be an audio record of what's happening ecologically. There's an interest around science nationally to have baseline understandings of audio experience outdoors. Other reserves are doing this too, so we can tap into this audio collection of audio sounds from, I was talking to Laurel today that Crossroads is doing something similar, collecting audio sounds outdoors. So we're hoping we get funding for that. So that's just one example of, we're trying to think beyond, like, how do we bridge across the university, bridge with arts agencies, things like that, to think about these holistic connections. The other one is technology. And this, we want to be maybe the most technologically advanced reserve in the system. That's things like, well, building off partnerships that the university already has with Titletown Tech, which is out of Green Bay. It's a partnership between Microsoft and the Green Bay Packers to spur new technologies and technology startups. The Water Council in Milwaukee, which also has startups around water. We are working with Cellcom and a company called Exonus. They are a sensor company out of Texas to put, right now they're like testing sensors on birds, so you can track bird migration and look at bird feeding patterns. So things like that, and how could we maybe have visual displays and bring that education to the classroom around technology, thinking about kind of the intersection of water technology for jobs and what it means to retain talent and retain young people around jobs around water. So just taking an overall tech viewpoint, because the university is interested in that generally, and it just sees as important to the region. And the bottom is the 4 pillars that every reserve is based on. They have programs and they have a staff person for each of these. Again, research, education, stewardship, and training. The acronym is REST, and I'll talk through what that means right now. So for stewardship and training, the focus here is on helping communities make, or kind of, use the science to guide decision-making on planning, on address coastal zone challenges like stormwater management or development, working waterfronts. So there's some national programs, expertise that we could bring in. We'd also kind of work with communities to see what kind of training would be of use to your members of your community. Would it be to learn more about how to respond to fluctuating water levels, or creating a survey to look at tourism around water, things like that. Very much focused on decision making. And then there would be a staff member assigned to kind of oversee that for the region. Research and education. This is, the crux of this really is some sort of probably built infrastructure, like a visitor center, interpretive center. I do want to emphasize that we would want to think about collaboration and not competing with existing entities like museums or nature centers or schools that already do this kind of work, but what kind of niche could the NERR fill there, not to be competing for visitation or anything like that. This would be the central, kind of the focal point of the reserve. It would have displays, water-centric displays, conference space potentially, maybe dorm space for overnight accommodations, lab areas, boat access, and a dock facility. Oops. I work with Matt Dornbush, our dean of the business school. He recently visited Apalachicola, which is a reserve in the panhandle of Florida. They get about 300,000 people a year to their visitor center, not with even a lot of advertising, because it really functions like a national park visitor center, in the sense that people come there to get information about the reserve, but also as this kind of a central hub to learn about recreational opportunities. So we can see that potentially this reserve could work with visitor bureaus or the convention and tourism groups, DNR even, to say, like, people come in, they want to go kayaking. Okay, here's some great kayaking up in Peshtigo, or here's great bird watching in Door County. Here's a company that you can go with, or a entity that will take you out to do fishing trips. So being both kind of thinking about recreational uses plus this education and research is one vision we have for this. And it could be a new facility, it could be partnering with an existing facility, it could be retrofitting a old building. That is, anything's really on the table for what this looks like. And as I mentioned, this will be a multi-component reserve. So like the reserve in Ohio is 500 acres. It's all contained on DNR owned property. They have a building there and then all their land and water areas right there. We are not probably going to have that model. We'll have this model where we'll have a visitor center, likely in one of the urban areas around the region, and then have these natural components, these natural areas that are part of that reserve, and we'd send people to, we'd go there to do educational programming, we do our research there. So probably focusing on one of the urban locations for the visitor center. A bit about the kind of general site statistics. So just this year, I mentioned that reserve systems, each reserve got a bump up in how much federal funding they get. Now it's at about $750,000 per year for basic operations. That's the 70% of the budget. We'll have to make a match of about $300,000 to keep, just that's part of the agreement with having a reserve. When federal money is bumped up higher, then the match has to go higher. So we have to always be thinking about that a bit. In terms of facilities, actually not every reserve even has a facility. The North Carolina Reserve, I was talking to the reserve manager recently, their most northern and most southern points are an 8-hour drive between them. And at the time of development of the reserve, they decided that they couldn't invest in both that much spread plus a visitor center. So they don't even have a visitor center. They just have staff members that go to those different sites. They have staff essentially spread along the whole North Carolina coast. That's not the model that we want to have. We definitely want to have a physical presence, but yeah, every reserve does it differently. And when a reserve is designated, you get, I think, an initial $1 million for a building. So that is not probably going to take us very far. It's a great start though. So we would do a lot of fundraising. We'd look to private and public partnerships for creating a visitor center. We really want to be visionary with this and we've been advised to think big and have big plans for what this visitor center, education center could be. And then in terms of the size of reserves, they range, from 500 acres, the one on Lake Erie, but like I said, it's a contained in one space, to the reserve in Alaska, which is 300,000 acres. We will fall somewhere in the middle of those two. We won't be, I don't think, 300,000 acres, but we have to think about how much area can we reasonably manage, what's feasible in terms of getting visitors and educators and researchers out there, and what just like our long-term budget for being able to take up land areas and really use them properly. So yeah, between 500 and 300,000 acres is what we're thinking about. There was recently, Noaa just put out some economic impact analyses. They took 4 reserves, 2 in Florida, 1 in Oregon, and I forget what the 4th one was, to look at what these reserves have meant for local economies. And I don't have the data in front of me, but I can certainly share it with you. But it was significant, like what the kind of ripple effect of jobs was there, the tourism, the visitation numbers. It was interesting to see when they start doing these economic analyses, what it means to have a reserve in a community. And again, I'm happy to share that report. It just came out a few months ago. So this is what the reserve system is. I want to talk now about where we are in designation, the designation process. So it's a six-step process, very much laid out by Noaa. Every reserve has to go through the same process. Starts with this letter of interest from the governor. That was for us March of 2019. Then we got a favorable response. It was the timing of Wisconsin's request was good, I think, because at that same time, Noaa had completed a feasibility analysis of where they wanted to see future reserves. They were already interested in seeing another one on the Great Lakes, specifically in Lake Michigan, so that the state's interest and Noaa's interest really aligned to be a good fit for timing, because there was already plans to bring a new reserve to the region. After that, and this is where we are now, we are in the site selection and nomination process. I'll talk about that in a second, but after we have a site selected, then we work with Noaa to draft an environmental impact statement and also write a management plan. That will be about 1.5 years, those two things together. During that time, the NOAA works with the landowners in the states to establish memorandums of understanding, because the state or the federal government or even the land trusts maintain ownership of those lands, but there has to be a relationship between like what's that management going to look like and how is the partnership going to look like. There's a public declaration of decision, a comment period that's in the Federal Register, there's a comment period, and then you end with and celebrate with a designation ceremony. Our timeline is so 2022, we hope to have a site selected and our nomination packet on the governor's desk by August of 2022. The nomination essentially will go from the university to the governor's office, and then the governor's office forwards it on to NOAA, who then has the final say and approval. They make that final call. Assuming that that's okay and we can move forward, then we'll start working on writing our management plan towards the end of 2023 and the end of 2022 into 2023. This will be, we'll need significant public input there. We'll have some working groups to help us write the management plan. Really, the idea is that you design the operation plan for the reserve for the next 5 to 10 years, and that should really be driven by community input regionally, both from where the visitor center will be to the whole region, because the NERR represents the region, including Michigan, representation from Michigan. We submit that to NOAA for approval, and our goal is to be designated by the end of 2024. NOAA wants to see all 3 reserves in designation designated by the end of 2024 to fit kind of within the first administration of the president's administration. So maybe some years off, but we have a lot to do, so it doesn't feel like a long time at all to get there. And the reason it really takes a while, though, is because we want to make sure we're having community meetings like this, that we have multiple types of committees that are helping us pick a site, write a management plan, and we want to do it right from the beginning, because we do, again, see this as like a 100-year investment by building one of these reserves and bringing it to the region. So the site selection and nomination process, this is our timeline that we're operating on right now. These tasks are tasks that, again, NOAA establishes for us. We have 3 committees that are helping us complete these tasks. The first one was getting the committees organized. We are just getting our 3rd committee organized. We just had a vote on the membership yesterday, so we're finally totally complete with task number 1. We're in the midst of task number 2, which we're developing criteria to select a site, and I'll share that criteria with you in just a second, the structure for it at least. Then the site development committee will preliminary screen some sites, just generally giving ideas of where good sites might be located. Then a committee spends almost a year applying the criteria to the sites, thinking about what's the best fit for natural areas and visitor center. They put a nomination or a recommendation forth to our coordination. This is like essentially our steering committee, our political arm of our process. If that's approved tentatively, then we establish the boundaries of the reserve, the actual, here's where the reserve is, here's some core areas, here's buffer areas around it. And again, we hope to get the nomination to the governor's office by July or August of next year. The criteria, so we had been operating from the top 5 criteria. We've been working with those until just a few weeks ago, we learned that NOAA's introduced some new criteria. So essentially what we're looking at is environmental representativeness. Do the sites you select represent different functions of the ecosystem? Do they capture what's happening around the bay? And for us here, I think what we're looking for really is this, I mentioned this gradient of pristine to restored, because that's an interesting story to tell. This isn't just about only capturing pristine ecosystems, but sharing a story and helping be a model for other areas looking to do large-scale restoration, similar to things like the Fox River cleanup and other wetland work that we've done here. We've been working a bit with Ducks Unlimited to think about sites that would be captured to tell that story. You also consider the value of the site for doing research and monitoring. Are you going to contribute different types of wetland habitats, some upland forest area, some estuary functions? You want to have that range there for research. We have consideration for education and interpretation. That means how accessible to school groups? Is there a good road access? Potentially good signage? Could you add signage easily to make it accessible? Making sure that it can attract diverse audiences and you can see, yeah, it can be a place for everyone, not just certain groups. And then long-term, like, what's the management considerations? Noaa doesn't want to see you put a reserve next to a site that might be targeted for mining, for example, because yeah, there could be disruptions to your research program if a mine goes in next to you, just as an extreme example, but thinking about long-term management and land use of an area. And then so the three new ones, and I think these are really helpful because they're things that we as a committee had been talking about but hadn't formalized, especially this one. What is the infrastructure resilience to climate change? And then also in the Great Lakes, because fluctuating water levels is such a concern, you probably know we've gone from high to low in about 7-8 years. Do we need to be considerate of another swing in water levels, and where we build infrastructure, and is there going to be excess issues because of that? And then the potential to build partnerships, to work with communities. Do you have good relationships with landowners, the DNR, Fish and Wildlife Service, counties, land trusts? And then finally, is there commitments of time and potentially financial commitments from institutions that you want to partner with? So we are taking the structure and then doing some modification to make sure that they reflect the interests of this region and the Great Lakes interests, because they're written for kind of ocean systems generally and need a little bit of modification for the Great Lakes. We hope to submit this criteria to Noaa in early September. And then once it's available, we'll share it with the community and the folks here who are helping to represent Sturgeon Bay. One of our more recent accomplishments is we established relevant coastal geography, which was part of the process that Noaa asked from us. Essentially, the map on the right is everything in green is coastal areas that where we'll look at land areas within that green area as potential sites for the reserve. And then on this map is the same coastal areas, but then you can also see in blue the outline of the watershed. And I share that just to show you that the watershed, essentially all the upland area contributing to the reserve is huge. It's a huge watershed. And we really care about what's happening. We know that what happens upland impacts what happens in the bay. So once the reserve boundaries have been established, I think once the reserve's designated, every reserve establishes a target watershed. It could be your whole watershed, it could be sub areas. That's what you really focus on for your working with groups, your research, your kind of upland type of management concerns. So we will do the same thing with this, with our watershed here. But just to show you that we'll have a large footprint no matter where the reserve is, that we really can, it's going to be more than just an entity for people that live around the bay, but certainly communities much farther upstream and downstream. In red, most significantly, the area above the dam in Menominee and some of it in De Pere, we cut those areas off because they won't actually be considered as part of the reserve designation. So I should back up and say the green area represents the U.S. Geological Survey's HUC 12 boundaries for watershed boundaries. We needed some sort of delineating boundary. So we use that. Let me just actually move ahead a second. We extended it a little bit to include Dutchman's and Ashwaubenon Creek near Green Bay because they have direct connections to the Fox River, which we know is very significant input of nutrients to the bay. But we excluded portions above the De Pere Dam and the Menominee Dam because those were a little bit too far upstream and there wasn't very much publicly owned land that we had to really even worry about. So what we've been doing now is essentially looking at all the publicly owned, the state or federal or land trust land in that green area, just to get an idea of who are the landowners, who do we want to start talking to about potential inclusion in the reserve, like who are the big players. It's DNR, certainly the Door County Land Trust, the Oneida Reservation, the chairman of the Oneida Nation, Chairman Tahasi Hill, he's a member of our steering committee, and Pat Pelkey, their environmental officer, he's on our site development committee, so we're already in conversation with them about what it might look like to have some reserve land. I think, interestingly, no reserves, no NERRs in the country have tribal lands included in their designation, but that's certainly something we would explore if the tribes are interested here. this took a little while. This is the tip of Door County. These boundaries are a little bit weird, so I want to talk through them with you. We wanted to follow, so here we're trying to think about the Green Bay Watershed. This reserve, our mandate from the state is to be in the waters of Green Bay, which we know gets a little bit tricky at the tip of Door County because there's a lot of mixing between Lake Michigan and Green Bay. But we tried to follow the watershed line, especially through Washington Island. So although we've made a cut across the island, potentially that represents primarily where a lot of the state-owned land is in Washington Island. But we ended up including all of Rock Island and all of Plum Island because it didn't really make sense to split those. There's a lot of state land there. And then this blue line is the water boundary that we'll consider. We chose the 20-foot littoral zone because that's where you probably primarily would do research related to the reserve. So that's why we have that blue line there. And then the blue line at the top is the boundary with Michigan. So we'll be looking essentially everything contained within the blue line, and the green areas are what we're looking at right now. And that's not necessarily, these won't be the boundaries of the reserve, but it's where we can start the consideration for publicly owned lands. I'm happy to talk in more detail about these if you have more questions, because it took us a while to get here. And yeah, just essentially we followed the 20-meter or the 20-foot Noaa's lines for depth right there, with the understanding that there is a lot of mixing and we're not going to get it perfectly right. And I should say also that no matter where the boundaries are, that doesn't mean you only can work in that region. That just means that's where you'd focus your research program. But certainly we would work with other agencies and nonprofits and groups that are doing research outside those boundaries on research programs, because we serve the Lake Michigan, Lake Huron ecosystem. Just the boundaries of the reserve would be facing Green Bay, but plenty of opportunity to partner. We would definitely be partnering with groups that are working on the Mink River estuary or on the Lake Michigan, the new shipwreck designation, things like that. Finally, just want to highlight some of our recent successes. The initial funding, Noaa gave us initial funding to part of that supporting my salary and to explore the reserve or to get designated. So that's been great support. We got support from the fund from Lake Michigan out of Milwaukee. We just recently, last 2 weeks ago, I think, signed a contract with Wisconsin Coastal Management. They gave us funding to support public outreach, to do, and primarily to do the mapping work that's going to be required to do the boundary delineation. As I mentioned, we have a proposal in to Sea Grant to do that soundscape exhibit. We also have a proposal into the National Science Foundation. That's a big regional partnership with the Great Lakes Observation System, the Alliance for the Great Lakes, the UW Green Bay, to do some taking data from buoys and weather stations and creating a good model that researchers and public could use to access information, basically translating the data to make it more accessible. That's, fingers crossed, that would be a nice, a big grant for us to, and the NERR would be a big focus of that. But yeah, we're lots of moving parts, and then we're exploring private partnerships and potentially working with some private agencies for funding and things like that. Okay, so I just want to end with, we have a website. If you want to keep staying up to date on what's happening, the website's a good spot, but we have a newsletter. I should have our next newsletter out maybe 2 weeks from now or so. You can sign up through an email to me or through our website. Excuse me. And then when it comes time to work on the management plan, we're going to have working groups that help us write that management plan. We'll probably have one to represent the research, the stewardship, the education, the training, some of the land management considerations. And we would probably come back to the community, maybe the committee here, to look for representation to help us work on that working group and the management plan working group. So we're happy to take names now. If you have an interest in helping write the management plan, I can take your name now and I'd be in touch once we have a site to start planning for that. And that the working groups would come from all over the region, again, so we can have good representation and community input and think about the regional impact of the reserve. So yep, the two biggest next steps would be, or to learn more, would be to stay informed of the committee's work here, to sign up for the newsletter, and then to join a management plan working group or put your name up forth for that if you're interested. And I'm happy to come back when we have a site, maybe a year or so from now, and just talk to you about the next steps at that point, because there's a lot of things change pretty quickly. We're trying to move pretty swiftly through the process, but thorough. So there'll always be lots of opportunities for updates along the way. I think that's all. Yeah, I'll be back. But I'm happy to, now take questions or answer any inquiries that you guys have. Thank you.
Any particular reason why the reserve doesn't go to Michigan?
Into Lake Michigan?
No, into the state of Michigan.
Oh, yeah. Well, reserves, except for I think maybe the Chesapeake Bay Reserve. More recently, NOAA's like to kind of keep them within one state for ease of management. So the Lake Superior Reserve is located right at the Minnesota border in Superior. So they do a lot of programmatic focus in Minnesota, as we would hope we would do in UP. But I think just for ease of like management agreements, it's been easier to keep it contained in one state. That doesn't mean long-term that there wouldn't be plans to make another reserve in Lake Michigan that we could collaborate with. But for now, it's focused on Wisconsin. That you'd have to talk to Noaa, like law. I'm not sure exactly the reason for that, but we've been confined to Wisconsin. Yeah.
I'm new to this whole idea, but are you, Bay area, competing at this?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
Or do you just hear each criteria and they're looking at it?
Yeah, we're not competing. So that essentially NOAA is not looking at any other site in Lake Michigan to put a reserve at any time soon. So it's not a guarantee that, like, I like to say it's probably if or when, not if we'll get it. We just have to go through the steps of the process. And they've put money behind it. They've supported our work so far. So not competition, but we just want to make sure to follow their criteria and all the steps that they require of us. And I don't anticipate any roadblocks, but we just always are trying to stay on top of things with presentations like this and making sure we know what's going on. But yeah, no competition, which is good for us.
The question online, can the public have influence for designation?
Yeah, well, sure, yeah. Like things like this, of course, coming to meetings and offering feedback. There's through the federal process, there'll be, once a site's about to be proposed, we will have formal meetings in collaboration with NOAA, like where they announce it, I think 30 days in advance, and there's procedures for that. In every community that's being considered, and that will be the maybe more formal time for consideration or for public input, but certainly we welcome feedback and email me along the way for places for input. Yeah, and I should say that the university is, because we serve such a big region and we have locations all over, we're pretty agnostic about where the reserve eventually ends up. The process, we hope, helps, that's why the criteria are there. We have these 3 committees to help us to guide that process. And we see it as a win for the region, no matter where the reserve ends up, because it will serve the region quite broadly in terms of programmatic focus. So we are looking at all communities and considering everything on the table in that green area that I mentioned. Yes.
So is that something that will become available for?
Yeah, so we're working with Mike Kutnick. He's I don't know if anyone knows Mike. He's worked with the Lake Superior Reserve quite closely on some of our GIS support. He's formerly with Estuary, the big GIS group. And like just this week, I've been corresponding with him to help give me ideas of acreage, public land acreage. I think once we have that, there's a lot to like figure out in terms of what's public land and who owns what. I'm happy to share that with everyone once that's public, maybe like a month or so from now when I get it all finalized. It's been really interesting to understand ownership and who's the big ownership players in the region.
Their flexibility milestone. Or what I'm getting at, is there a way we can help accelerate?
Well, I don't, maybe.
On site selection, it appears to me that year from now could be by the end of this year.
Oh yeah, there's no way we would do it by the end of this year. The steps we have to take, so like there's 3 committees. One of them is just going to get started in September, and they're going to need time. So for example, they'll take the criteria, they need to develop a process for applying it. Then they're going to do site visits. They'll go to Marinette, they'll go to Sturgeon Bay, they'll go to Brown County, they'll look at sites, these communities. So most of you might know that there's a group in Sturgeon Bay that most of the members are here for representing your region. This committee will do some back and forth with that community, this committee to answer questions. They'll present a formal presentation to us. I do not see it happening we're very excited to do it, but I don't think it would happen any faster, but just because, and there's a lot of back and forth with Noaa. We submit criteria to them, they have to have time to approve it. So yeah, I'd be very pleased to get it done by July of next year. But that being said, there's always opportunities to write letters of support, especially, I think Caitlin probably can talk more about that, but like organizing around your community for that, because when the designation packet goes to the governor's office, it'd be great to show community support from around the region that there's a lot of buy-in. And I think, yeah, letter writing, editorials, things like that show support for the NERR would be fantastic and it would only help us.
Just for point of clarification, I think you said this, but I just would like the reiteration. So I have it
Yep.
in my mind. Boundaries that you show, that was just for site selection and not necessarily the boundaries of the reserve.
Yeah, that's really important clarification. So this is what Noaa refers to. Yeah, it's cut off. It's relevant coastal geography. It's all the areas that can be considered for the reserve. We would only be looking at land and water areas in those boundaries, but that is not the boundaries of the reserve. No, that would be way too big. We couldn't manage that much land. So we'll pick ideal portions of land in that and then have a new map develop once we have those boundaries established. Thank you. That's a very important point of clarification.
In your when will your research then begin after all these processes happen?
Yeah, so well, research is already kind of ongoing. The university is already like Val Klump has the dean of the School of Freshwater Sciences has been working in the Bay for years. But the actual for Noaa, that research program, we could start that once we're designated. We don't have to even have a building then. I think Lake Superior, it took maybe 2 or 3 years to get a building going, but they started their education programming, their research right away. Same thing, we would want to get started with that as soon as we have the funds for operation and get the equipment and the supplies from Noaa to do that. So 2025, I'd say.
Hypothetically then, in your research, if you found an emergency sort of situation in the environment, would you advocate for remediation or anything like that, or where do you sit in those?
Yeah, we are not an advocacy group. We won't be any type of advocacy agency or entity. We see the role of the NERR as really being able to provide valuable baseline data. So one advantage of having federal support for something like this and being part of a 40-year program is you can start a program of monitoring and addressing whatever issue you want, and then have long-term support and not worry about it, phasing out or getting cut. I think that's going to be really valuable to have that diverse set of samples and a long-term data set that we could contribute to an entity that did want to take an advocacy position or make a policy statement. But that's really not going to be the role of the reserve to take those kind of positions, just to provide the data. Yep.
Have other reserves in the process start to designate sites that run into issues, anti-forces that can be anticipated ahead of time? Repeat the question?
Sure. The question was, have other reserves that have gone through the process gone through people maybe who aren't supportive of the reserve or anti-reserve designation?
Right, that does this generate controversy typically that ends up in those kinds of fights?
Yeah, that's a good
Can at least be
question.
anticipated, so
Yeah.
you see it coming.
I haven't heard of specific cases of that. I would say that our thinking here is to really lean into the non-regulatory aspect. That's just nature of probably Northeast Wisconsin, and that's fine. That's why we chose this designation. That's where I might see any type of issue coming up with people concerned about, naturally so, they can't fish or they can't bring commercial boat traffic. So that's why we're leaning into that message, making it very clear. I talked to a sport fishing group in Menominee early May. really supportive, same message, like non-regulatory. So that's what, yeah, basically that's why I'm doing a lot of these presentations, is just to be really clear about messaging. I can't speak to other reserves, but that's what we're thinking about here. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
We're looking
Trying to, yeah. And making sure people know it's not a land buy or anything. It's all federally land that's already exists for these purposes. We're not going in to buy or take new land. That's not at all what's happening.
Perhaps you already addressed this question, but NERR doesn't specifically pick on threats to the bay per se. In other words, BFAS or back 40 mine or phosphorus pollution, all of which are considerable threats to the bay.
Yeah.
That is not something that NERR would
Right.
be involved with.
Right, yeah, so I have had some questions from the group, the Back 40 group, the coal pile group in Green Bay, and I always the same message, like, we're not advocacy. I really can't really go to citizen meetings. I can provide you with data and information that you can use for those efforts. Just, yeah, we want to have long-term success in the region and be as, as supported as possible. But we recognize that those are important efforts that are happening.
How does the research get chosen? Is this who's got the funding and what they want to do? The area?
Well, yeah, so the baseline research is kind of dictated by Noaa. We become part of that program, and that's the kind of basic water quality monitoring. Then the NERR Science Collaborative that I mentioned, those are pockets of grant funding to do very specific projects where you bring different reserves together for similar research. And then once the entity is there, once the reserve's there, based on, like it is now, where's the funding, what's of interest to funding agencies, what's of interest to people that you want to partner with, even outside and inside the reserve, and probably a continuation of the work that the university is already doing, like the bird monitoring work, the Cat Island chain, the restoration of the Cat Island, which is a significant restoration project. I see us continuing with that because it's an important bird migratory. We're learning a lot about bird migratory habits and bird populations that way. And then as new groups come and have ideas and emerging issues, you don't even know what is going to come up in the pipeline. PFAS, for example, that's a newish issue, and emerging contaminants. We would want to be part of those projects as they emerge. So it's really hopefully a platform for regional collaboration for those types of research projects. Sam, were there any more questions? Oh, yep.
What ecosystem types will be considered?
Oh, that's a good question. We have criteria that are looking at a range. I do not have it off the top of my head besides estuary features, but essentially there's like a list of 10, I think. I'm happy to share with that respondent. I want to make sure I get it right to tell you what we're considering, but all the kind of usual habitats you might find close to the shoreline.
Regarding criteria, you mentioned there are required for the site to be located, improved. Is infrastructure like a major issue, or is quality of land that's a major concern? What's the most
Yeah, that's a good question. That's going to be essentially the weighting of the criteria and how they're going to, if there will be weighting at all, that's going to be the responsibility of the site evaluation committee. That's being chaired by Nicole Van Helden of the Nature Conservancy. I looked at Connecticut's criteria and how they established it just last week. I'm talking to them next week, 2 weeks. They didn't weight at all, actually. So their scoring system was evenly distributed across that list of, well, for them, the top five. And then they took a numeric number and then kind of worked within that. It was pretty clear actually what site emerged from that numeric numbering. So they didn't apply a weighting system. So it's up to the committee to do that. The one kind of unique thing here is a lot of other reserve states, like Louisiana, for example, they're looking at the whole Louisiana coastline. So when they're selecting a site, they're selecting a basin or a whole estuary. We already had the estuary that we're looking at. That's part of the letter of support. The governor's letter was the Green Bay Estuary. So now we're looking at areas, which is a little bit different because we're not considering whole basins anymore. So it hasn't been a direct, we can't necessarily look at other reserves, how they've done it, because we're looking at such a more constrained area already. But that being said, it will, in the end, the committee will decide how to make that decision. It might become like we look at infrastructure as one process and then land areas as another, and they might decide that that's the best course of action or combinations of those two things. But once we have that, I'm happy to share it with you. It's going to be a few months before we get to that point, but it can be shared with the public when we have it. And if you're really interested, I could share with you the nomination packet from other states. It's like 300 pages of how they made this decision at other sites, but it's interesting to see, especially Connecticut, which just did it a few months ago. But that would be a really deep dive, potentially.
Feel free to email it.
Or I can share with the committee with Mark's group too as well.
Anything else? Emily, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Like I've already, you will be back next year.
Okay, I'll come back next year and provide an update for everyone. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you. As a wrap up, couple of things. DCEC, based upon the data it receives, will take a position on certain issues. We won't take that position until that data is verified in every way, but a position on Cladafra, a position on what is going on right now in Gills Rock. We will take that position. We think it's important to take that position. I was introduced to NERR by another force in this county whose name is Annie Egan. Annie invited me to go on a boat ride down in Green Bay with members of NERR, and I was just impressed by what NERR was about to undertake. Annie is also the mother of Dan Egan, and most of you know about his book, but I'll mention it anyway. The Death and Life of the Great Lakes. It ties everything together in terms of what this body of water was, what it is, what it can be, and hopefully what it can't be. I would suggest that if you haven't read it, read it, because it ties what Emily is talking about, what I was trying to talk about, all together in a concise manner. Dan is writing another book right now about the phosphate situation in the estuaries into Green Bay. The book probably won't be out for another 6 months, but he's working on it. In terms of our organization, I neglected to mention that we're sponsoring a series of events. This is the second in that series. The first, thanks to Mike Barkey, who is our president, was a seminar on overdevelopment, over-tourism in Door County. Some places have too much, some places don't have enough. And it was a very successful seminar consisting of 7 different speakers from different points of view. And I think it's something that we all feel we should have another seminar on once everybody has taken more of a position. The third seminar we're doing, his name has been mentioned several times tonight, is going to be given by Val Klumpf. Steve Etaw of our organization is sponsoring that. It's in about 3 weeks. And this individual is one of the foremost living authorities on the Great Lakes. I urge you to attend that lecture. It'll be in Egg Harbor on August 18th. Lastly, I think this is an emotional plea on my part. We're all part of the good and the bad as to what is going on in the Great Lakes and in Door County. Door County, to all of us, is a very, very, very special place. We need to keep it special by taking care of it. The beauty is here. The camaraderie is here. The people are here. But unless we take a position on what is going on a negative basis, there's a chance it won't be here. So I urge all of you to take small steps to look at what Door County is, the beauty of Door County, the aesthetics of Door County, the people of Door County, the water of Door County, and do your part, however minimal it may seem. It's important to you, it's important to me, it's important to all of us. So I think what Emily has basically lectured us about tonight is another step in terms of preserving this area. Green Bay needs to be taken care of. We need to take care of it. We're the ones who basically got it into a little bit of trouble. We're the ones who are the conservators, and we need to keep it safe for future generations. So I thank all of you for coming, and I hope to see many of you in about 3 weeks, and we'll definitely see Emily a year from now, whether she likes it or not. So thank you.